to generally imitate any punching type Hatsu ability he's been hit with is not a talent Gon and Killua have ever displayed. Hey, what's up everybody? It's LeeLos, and today we're talking about why Ging versus the Phantom Troupe is complex. Stay steady in pursuit of your dreams and goals. You're born to win, you're made for greatness, and I definitely believe in you guys. Keep up the great work each and every day. So Ging versus the Phantom Troupe is a battle between a legendary hunter versus a group of legendary bandits. Today we're going to analyze every single power-up and ability these characters have displayed to explain overall why Ging versus the Phantom Troupe is complex. So first off, let's talk about the scaling and abilities of Ging Freaksis. Throughout the entirety of the series, Ging is implied to be immensely powerful. Ging is a top 5 Nen user, which is a more impressive feat than being a top 5 hunter, because there's many powerful Nen users that are not hunters, and it's implied that Ging has gotten even stronger after obtaining this title, with the anime showing us a very young Ging that looks exactly the same as the Ging who defeated Razor, implying Ging could have obtained the title of top 5 Nen user around 10 years ago and then gotten much stronger since. There's a few arguments as to why Ging would be stronger now than he was when he first obtained the top 5 Nen user title. First off, he has the talent to generally imitate any punching type Hatsu ability that he's been hit with, and given Jing's annoying personality and his reputation he's built up from doing many crazy stunts, who knows how many punching type abilities he's been hit with over this time frame and how large his overall Hatsu ability arsenal actually is. In just the short period of time that we've seen Ging in the story, he's already gotten stronger by gaining Leorio's Hatsu ability. And debatably, he might actually be doing Leorio's Hatsu ability better than Leorio is. A second argument, you could also argue that Ging has grown stronger through gaining battle experience over the years. It's shown and stated to us numerous times throughout the series that battle experience is a very important component in growing stronger as a Nen user in Hunter x Hunter. The concept of Ging gaining more battle experience after becoming a top 5 Nen user is a real possibility. Not only do we visibly see Ging canonically get into more fights and grow stronger on screen in the very short amount of time we've actually seen Ging as a character, but it's also shown and stated to us that Ging has accomplished numerous very impressive achievements as a hunter. Jing's numerous achievements as a hunter are not only stated to us in the manga and data books, but it is shown to us by how much money Ging has. Ging is ridiculously rich due to his success as a hunter. There's a scene where Ging states he's willing to pay all of Beyond's employees twice as much as what Beyond has paid them, and he does this very casually, with there being over 200 employees, with some of them being paid 1.5 billion Hunter x Hunter dollars, and the alternates being paid 200 million. The highball interpretation, at most, that could be a total of 300 billion Hunter x Hunter dollars that Beyond is paying to these guys at the highest possible interpretation, and Ging is casually able to double that to potentially 600 billion and pay that out with no worries of any kind. If you say that the Hunter x Hunter currency is meant to represent yen, then this translates to being around $3.5 billion that Ging is casually just willing to give away with no worries at all. And it's heavily implied that the reason Ging has this much money is due to his success as a hunter, going on missions and achieving incredible accomplishments. And then when you factor in that Ging has been preparing for the Dark Continent while knowing a lot more about the Dark Continent than many other characters, the concept of Ging becoming stronger over the years becomes a real possibility. Finally, you could argue that Ging might have talent relative to Gon and Killua, the talent to generally imitate any punching type Hatsu ability he's been hit with is not a talent that Gon and Killua have ever displayed. Furthermore, he passed the Hunter exam at 11 years old, the same way Gon did, but he was the only person to pass the Hunter exam that year, essentially performing the feat that Killua did after completing a good portion portion of his training in Greed Island, but Ging was doing that at 11 years old. There's actually a Hisoka backstory that was written by the author of Tokyo Ghoul, in which it's implied that 11-year-old Ging was already very powerful, strong enough to defeat someone who might have already had a Hatsu ability. If Ging does have relative talent to Gonin Killua, then the concept of Ging getting stronger over the years is pretty much guaranteed based on how quickly Gonin Killua gets stronger in very short time frames. For example, after just 10 days of sparring Beanault, Gonin Killua go from being so weak that Beanault could beat them both 2v1 to 10 days later, they're both individually strong enough to defeat a healthy Beanault 1v1. Gon, in one day, went from getting speed blitzed and nearly one-shot by Knuckles' warm-up punches while he was holding back, then one day later, Gon's actually able to hold his own with a full power Knuckle. Gonin Killua gets stronger at an absolutely insane rate, with both of them showing feats of getting stronger mid-battle. If Jing's talent is even somewhat relative to this, then the odds of him getting stronger over the years is a very high probability. Bisky shows us that if you have 5 characters of different power levels, the character who's ranked 4th can actually defeat the number 1 strongest character there if the 4th ranked character is under their best condition. Meanwhile, the number 1 strongest character is under their worst condition. And in Nen battles in Hunter x Hunter, many different things can affect circumstances in a battle, such as if you know what your opponent's Hatsu ability is, or if you create a plan. A good example of this being Gon versus Genthru, where they were able to create a very specific plan and training to counter Genthru's abilities in order for Gon to defeat him, despite Gon being weaker than Genthru at the time. Considering that Netero states it had been more than 50 years since he was the number 1 strongest Nen user on Earth, using Bisky's example, you could argue that Ging, the moment he earned the top 5 Nen user title, he might have already had a chance at defeating Netero while Ging was in his best condition and Netero was in his worst condition. Then Ging would have gotten even stronger over the years after this. Furthermore, when you consider the fact that Ging knows that a younger, potentially even prime Netero went to the Dark Continent and it was too powerful for Netero to handle, and despite this, Ging is still confident in his abilities to go to the Dark Continent anyway, and Ging has been preparing for the Dark Continent for a while. When you factor all of this in, the concept of Ging being relative to Netero is a very strong possibility. The lowball interpretation is that Ging has low-end relativity to Netero and is still weaker than him. A medium ball interpretation is that Ging is just overall relative to Netero, and the high ball interpretation would be that Ging has now actually surpassed Netero. Ging states they're going on an unexplored route to the Dark Continent, and they might face a 6th calamity, one that's completely unknown. And despite this, Ging is still confident that he can protect other members on this trip. The reason this is really impressive is because Ging also states that with the other 5 calamities, it's a miracle that humanity in Hunter x Hunter hasn't already been wiped out by them. A highball interpretation is that each of these calamities is potentially a humanity defeating level threat, yet Ging is about to face another one of them and is still confident he can protect team members from it. He also says the best they can do is lock them up and stay away, and the highball interpretation of this statement would be that maybe Ging thinks he has something in his arsenal that could lock up these insane calamities. That really is a highball interpretation. I personally think he's more saying, we'll just avoid them. So now let's talk about the matchups and the scaling for the Phantom Troupe and their abilities. So first off, using the highball interpretation of Ging, the Phantom Troupe has pretty much no chance at victory. If Ging is actually stronger than Netero, there's just a immense probability that Ging would destroy them. Even using the medium ball interpretation of Ging, it would still be more likely that Ging would win against the Phantom Troupe. The problem with Netero, he doesn't just excel at one stat. He's not just really strong like Uvagen is. He's not just really fast like Killua, and he's not just really smart and has a lot of battle experience like Morel. well. He has all of that together. We see against Meruem, despite being very powerful, to be completely honest, stronger than anyone in the Phantom Troupe, faster than anyone in the Phantom Troupe, still had to get slapped around over 1,000 times before he even landed one attack on Netero. If Ging is relative to this level of power, or if you highball Ging and say that he's above this level of power, then this is simply too much for the Phantom Troupe to handle. The unknown factors of Jing's abilities leads to this fight being complex. For example, it's stated to us that Ging is very powerful. It's shown to us that Ging is very smart and skilled, but the area that's unknown is how fast is Ging. His overall speed is unknown because we don't know his total list of Hatsu abilities, we don't know what his main Hatsu ability actually is, and we don't know his speed scaling in general. These are the unknown elements that make the fight complex and actually create arguments that maybe the Phantom Troupe could potentially do something in a fight against Ging. Well, in complete honesty, just against the medium ball and low ball version of Ging, no matter what, the high ball version of Ging is very likely to just defeat the Phantom Troupe. Against a medium ball interpretation of Ging, the only real viable win conditions that the Phantom Troupe would actually have against him would be hitting him with a one-shot ability, something like Chrollo's Ben's Knife or Shalnark's Needle. And you could argue that maybe if Jing's Hatsu ability is some weird kind of hacks ability and he doesn't have this Netero tier of speed, then maybe they could sacrifice some Phantom Troupe members and land either Shalnark's Needle or hit him with Chrollo's Ben's Knife, and maybe they could win that way. That's kind of the only real arguments there are for the Phantom Troupe defeating someone as powerful as a medium ball or even low ball interpretation of Ging. And it's really just due to the fact that we don't know how fast Ging actually is. I would argue that if he's relative to Netero, using the medium ball interpretation, it is likely that he's relative to him in speed as well, but that's more of a debatable thing. It really just is a fact that Netero himself is a big step above even the strongest member of the Phantom Troupe, which is Chrollo, which is shown to us by Netero being bored at the concept of fighting Hisoka at the start of the series, even while Netero was rusty, and Hisoka having relativity to Chrollo. The reality is, characters like Ging, who on a medium ball interpretation is relative to Netero and on a high ball could be even stronger than him, it is more likely that he's going to be too much for the Phantom Troupe to handle, but you can make niche arguments that maybe the Phantom Troupe could somehow get a victory by hitting Ging with one of their more hacks type abilities, like Chrollo's Ben's Knife or Shalnark's Needle. If you give those abilities to Chrollo, I'm gonna be honest, Shalnark is not landing the needle on Ging. You're gonna have Chrollo use the ability himself. There are some niche arguments that maybe they could somehow get a victory by landing one of these two abilities on him, simply due to the fact that we do not know how fast Ging actually is. So that's what makes this versus battle complex. Another interesting factor, if you argue that Ging has talent relative to Gon and Killua, you could argue that Ging would actually get stronger as the fight went on, making it even more challenging for the Phantom Troupe to have a chance at winning. Also, if he's hit by Finks's Hatsu ability and survives it, he would then also gain Finks's Hatsu ability for him to use himself. Also, if Chrollo's not careful and hits him with other punching type Hatsu abilities, Chrollo could lead to just making Ging stronger as the fight goes on as well. But yeah, all that being said, Ging is overall more likely to defeat the Phantom Troupe, but against the medium ball interpretation of Ging, the Phantom Troupe might have some small chance of actually getting a win based on us not knowing how fast Ging actually is. In complete honesty, even if you lowball Ging, it's still very challenging for the Phantom Troupe to defeat somebody like that. But yeah, that's everything I wanted to say. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate the views in the comments. Like and subscribe, and I'll see ya on the next one.